Nutrition for Food Service and Culinary Professionals. Chapter 12. Today we're talking about weight management. If you look across the room, if you look down the hall, if you're at the mall, what you see is the incidence of overweight and obesity in our country. So we need to talk a little bit about that just as it relates to the culinary professional. So our learning objectives for today are to really explain what obesity and overweight are, including how people get themselves in that predicament, and also some of the health consequences. We'll be able to describe how to implement the following components of a weight loss program to lose weight and keep it off. Positive eating program, exercise, behavioral and attitude modification, social support, and help for the maintenance phase of weight loss. We're going to identify some of the weight loss beliefs, whether they're fact or fiction. And there's also going to be a discussion board on weight loss myths. So I'd like you to be thinking about that as well. Overweight and obesity are probably one of the most pressing challenges in the United States. And when you think about it, even children, we have such a high rate of incidence of obesity in children that it's become such a problem. 1 out of every 3 adults is obese. 1 in 3 adults is overweight, and that makes only 1 out of 3 that's normal weight. When you look at children and adolescents, it's such a tragedy that we need to really think about how we can all work together. And because of the percentage of food dollar that people are spending eating out, it really makes sense that we need to rope in the culinary professional to see just what we can do to help with that matter. So what are some of the basics of weight management? Bottom line is if someone is really trying to lose weight, you just have to have calorie balance, based on the activity level. The amount of calories consumed should equal the amount of calories that are used if you want to maintain. If you're trying to lose weight, you have to take in less calories. There's no other way to do this. There's no other way to solve the problem. So it's really important to look at the quantity of food people are eating, how they're, how it's being prepared, and really, have an understanding of that basic nutrition so that people, stop turning to fad diets and, try to, think about it in terms of a lifestyle and not as a temporary fix. What are some of the factors that play a role in obesity? Obviously, eating habits, and that's very complicated. Everyone comes to the table with different relationships with food, different cultures, different ways that we use food really affect, long-term, weight consequences. So the most important thing, as we learned early on in the chapter, in our textbook, is actually the importance of using food as fuel. And when we use food or eat food for other reasons than fuel, we can certainly get into habits of taking in too much. We also have to look at a person's exercise habits, or better yet, just how they move their body, or if they are at all. And then, of course, cultural and socioeconomic background is really important. Certain cultures really play a big part in what people choose to eat. Then, of course, you have to look at genetic background. That doesn't always indicate, someone's future risk for being overweight, but you can certainly see the environment that people live in. When you look at environmental factors, it's important to look at things like what kind of portion sizes are people eating? Is there greater ability to eat high calorie foods? When people are generally eating a lot of fast food in their daily eating plan, generally they're going to probably take in more calories than they really need. So environmental plays a big part in all of this as well. So what should people weigh? We have an index that we use to measure weight relative to height, and it's called body mass index. People that are overweight have an index of 25 to 29.9, and obesity is considered a body mass index over 30, over 30. So even better than that, there's more important things to look at, because when you look at a BMI, uh, first of all, it doesn't take into consideration your body mass. So if you are an athlete and you weigh a certain amount, it may look like you're obese when in reality you're just muscle bound. So it doesn't take into consideration body composition. It just merely looks at your weight relative to height. So, that's a concern when we're, trying to use only BMI as an indicator. Obviously, anything over 25 raises our risk for heart disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes, and that's why it's important to get it under control. This particular chart is also available online, and you just line up the height with the weight, and you can kind of see, what category a person falls in, whether they're normal, overweight, or obese. And, 9 times out of 10, a lot of people are very surprised where they end up. But like I mentioned, BMI doesn't necessarily tell us, the whole story, because it doesn't really share how much extra fat you have. Pound for pound, fat and muscle weigh the same thing. But when it's in your body, it's so much better to be more muscle, because that really is more active tissue, and that helps your body burn calories more efficiently. So a better indication of how you're doing is to measure waist circumference. For men, a desirable waist circumference is below 40. For women, it's below 35, because anything carried in the middle, belly fat, is more health threatening than fat that's in the hips and thighs. So again, men typically carry more of their fat in their belly. That's why men are called apples, and women are really compared to a pear, because generally women carry more of their fat in their hip and thigh. And after menopause, women tend to carry more abdominal fat. But we call it visceral fat, and it's very detrimental to health. So it's really important to understand BMI, but if you're really concerned about what the number is, it really should be waist circumference that we're really putting more emphasis on. So how does obesity affect our health? Well, anytime you have excessive fat or weight, it puts you more at risk for type 2 diabetes, any kind of insulin resistance. It tends to elevate our cholesterol levels, elevates blood pressure, puts us more at risk for heart disease and stroke, certain kinds of cancer, liver, gallbladder disease, and also sleep apnea. And studies show that even losing 10% of body weight can really improve these situations. So the goal is eating better so that we can lose weight and, put our numbers more at a normal level. So how do we do it? There's a lot of different diets. Every time you turn around, there's a new book, there's a new diet plan. And that's really the problem in our society, is we approach everything with the idea of a temporary fix instead of considering it lifestyle. If you make some moderate changes and be consistent with those and change over time, you're more likely to take the weight off and keep it off. But when you go on a very fast, rigid, restricted diet, many times it can lead to an eating disorder or disordered eating, and it can also, be a temporary weight loss. And then when a person goes back to their old way of eating, they tend to gain it back. The bottom line is you need to take in fewer calories and or burn more calories in physical activity. So that's really the key. I mean, you are where you're at, and you got there because you exceeded your needs for the day. So to lose weight, it just makes sense that you take in less and you burn more. Even more than that, it's so important to set realistic weight loss goals. A lot of times people get very energetic and they decide that they're going to go ahead and try to lose 50 pounds, when in reality, maybe they should try losing the first 5 or 10. And then when you feel the success of a shorter, smaller weight loss, then you can go on and exceed and continue your goal. But when you set unrealistic goals for yourself and you don't see your weight changing, people get really disillusioned and then end up, stopping the weight loss program. So again, every time you attempt weight loss, you lower your calorie needs because body composition changes. So it's important to be realistic. It's important to do it in a manner where you're not really depriving yourself. And we're going to cover more of that in a little bit. Even modest weight loss can produce such wonderful health benefits that's why it's important to set realistic goals and one step at a time. So what are the components of a weight loss program? Obviously, you have to look at what a person's eating and how they're moving their body. But it's also important to look at behavior and attitude, and also how much support are they getting. And also, once they lose the weight, what type of support is there to help them maintain it? So these are all very, very critical, and each one is dependent on the other. You can't do one without the other. When I think of a program, let's say like The Biggest Loser, that's a really good example of very restricted eating, excessive exercise. People lose a lot of weight and then they go back to their real life and they can't keep up that, pounding in terms of exercise. And, based on family life and everything else they have going on, they don't keep up their eating plan. And therefore, most of them gain weight and sometimes even gain more back. And that's more detrimental to your health than the initial weight loss, because your body composition continues to be more fat and less muscle. So the goal is trying to maintain some sort of exercise program to preserve your muscle mass so that you can burn calories more efficiently. And it's really it's a losing battle if you don't think about all the different components. So the first one is your eating plan. Obviously, you have to restrict some calories. Most women need about 1,500 to 1,800 calories a day. So if you're trying to lose a pound a week, a pound equals 3,500 calories. So if you divide that by 7 days in a week, that means that you should realistically cut back anywhere from 250 to 500 calories a day if you're trying to lose a pound a week. Now, most women who've been on weight loss programs typically don't lose more than about 0.5 or 0.8 pounds a week, and men anywhere from 0.8 to a pound a week. So it's unrealistic to expect yourself to lose 5 pounds a week, and if you do the first week, it's primarily water anyway. So the thing to remember is weight loss isn't just about a diet. It's about an ongoing new way of eating that changes habits, that incorporates a lot of good behaviors, and also, not only exercise, but also what you're eating and how you're eating and how often you're eating. So if you want to really see how people have lost weight, I always suggest going to the Center for Disease Control website and searching the weight loss registry. It's weight loss registry. When you do that, you'll see that anyone who's lost more than 100 pounds and have kept it off can generally link into this CDC site, and it lists some of the habits that people have experienced or the habits they've changed in order to maintain that weight. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear they ate breakfast every day. Number 2, they ate consistent meals. They didn't skip. They had 3 meals a day and a snack if they needed it. They made minor changes in their diet, and whatever they chose, they were consistent with it. So you have to make a commitment. And then the second thing is you have to be very consistent with the changes that you're making. And it can't be a temporary fix. It just can't, because it'll come back. So it's a very challenging process. Food choices should emphasize more non-starchy vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fat-free, low-fat milk, milk products, more of your plant-based foods. But if you want lean, if you want meat, make sure that it's lean, whether it's meat, poultry, fish, and then of course eggs and even nuts fit into that category. And then again, not eating excessive amounts of things that aren't good for us anyway, like a lot of added sugars and saturated fats and trans fats. So if you look at that list there, those three little dots, that is no different than anything we've talked about all semester. And that's what I want you to think about. It doesn't have to be hard. It's very easy. Most people make it harder on themselves, and it has to be. If you are consistently having more sugar or fatty food in your diet, then it just makes sense to alter some of those. And my philosophy is looking at three things: the quantity of food you're eating, how it's prepared, and how often you're having it. So if your diet looks really healthy, but every day you have to have 2 cups of ice cream at night, then maybe you should think about having less ice cream. Or maybe you should have an alternative to the ice cream and have less of it to lower the amount of calories that you're consuming. Because if you have a healthy diet and then every night you're consuming 400 or 500 extra calories, over time you're going to gain weight. So it just makes sense that over time you're going to lose it if you make those subtle changes. So again, one diet is no better than the next as long as you're eating fewer calories but still taking in adequate nutrients. Because if you consistently have junk food, and I hate to use the word junk food because I feel like there's not a lot of junk food, there's junk diets. But if you're eating a lot more, added sugars and fatty fried food and not emphasizing the food choices that we just talked about, the fruits, vegetables, grains, lean meats, then there's no way that you're going to be able to be successful eating with any plan. So the important thing is eating less calories, but still focusing on nutrient density. It's also very important to focus on a couple other things. One is hunger, one is fullness, and one is mindfulness. So what turns an everyday activity like eating into such an overwhelming process for so many people? The answer is obviously a very complex one. The bottom line is this: to make smart, healthy eating choices, your body and your mind have to work together to send essential cues about what you eat and when to eat. These clues give information about how much and what to eat. The sensation and emotions that signal when you're full, famished, or just wanting something to eat are complex. It's a very complex combination of body and emotional feelings. If you're attentive and responsive to your cues, your eating will be healthy, in control, and regulated. Dieting and disliking your body are incredibly detrimental to your emotional, mental, and physical well-being. They really inhibit your ability to accurately decode your body's messages and feedback. The dieting mindset is like taking a knife and cutting the connection that is your body's only line of communication with your head. The dieting mindset skews your knowledge of healthy eating so badly that you have no idea what to eat. And that's what people always say. It's like, I don't even know what to eat anymore. I'm so confused. Mindless eating is manifested in two ways. You can either obsess over it or you can ignore the internal feedback from both your body and your mind, rather than responding thoughtfully to your hunger and to the concern you have about your health. So you can see it's a very negative situation that you get into. The change to the way you eat is not discipline over what is on your fork, but mastery over your hungry mind. Mindful eating includes feeling the saltiness on each potato chip on your fingers as you pick it up, and then taste the salt when you put the chip on your tongue. It's being aware of and listening to the loud crunch of each bite and the noise that chewing makes in your head. When you're eating mindfully, as you eat the chips, you can take note of the rough texture against your tongue and the pressure of your teeth grinding together. You feel your saliva moistening the chip and filling the back of your throat as the chewed food slides down. Mindful eating is feeling the food in your stomach and experiencing the pleasure from eating it. This is only one small example of mindful eating. The goal is to know the ins and outs of your hunger by becoming well acquainted with every aspect of your body and your mind's intricate reactions to food and the process of eating. I highly recommend that everyone focus on and get more information on mindful eating. There's so many great books on it. One that I like is called Eating Mindfully by Susan Albers. It's a very good book. So you can see how I veered off from talking about food to talking about something as simple as the difference between hunger and fullness. Because if you really ask yourself, do you really understand what those feel like? A lot of people don't even pay attention. So it's a very emotional journey, but it's one that, is very important to think about. So this particular slide says weigh yourself frequently, but I would say no more than once a week, because for people who are actually trying to lose weight, it can be very detrimental if the number doesn't change. And we all know that fluid fluctuates, daily and even within the day. And sometimes you might see a few pounds and then the next day you're up again. And when you're basing your whole life on what a number on the scale tells you, it can be very, very detrimental to, improving your, healthful ways. So again, it's important to, use it as a guide to determine changes in weight, but don't focus so much on what the scale said. Don't let it be your ball and chain. So there's a lot of different eating tips. To cut calories without feeling hungry, you have to replace some of those really high calorie foods that are lower in calories that fill you up. And we mentioned those early on in the textbook, and that's what I meant by learning to eat large. When you're choosing foods that don't have as many calories but have a lot of fiber and water, such as vegetables and fruit and broth-based soups, those are definitely going to fill you up, and you're not really going to have the sensation of being hungry, and that's what you want to take care of. When look at your calorie allowance, it should allow for every food group. But when you realize just how much you get when you're eating vegetables because of the low content of calories, it's so much more beneficial. Obviously, smaller portions play into the mix, and that's why it's critical for chefs to really adopt that, because if you're serving small plates, even if it's a higher calorie density food, people enjoy it. They're going to fill up on it. They don't need a lot of it. Again, you want to pay attention to hunger and rather than how much food is on your plate. A lot of people will look at the plate and say it's not enough food if they go to a fine dining restaurant, and they realize it actually is enough food. So it's better to pay attention to, I'm starting to get satisfied. I don't really need all this food. And there's ways of handling that. Some people divide their food in half and put some of their food in a takeout container to have for lunch the next day or for another meal. On the other hand, some people visually divide their food in half and say, when I'm half done, that's more than enough that I need, and don't eat the rest. Or you can start a meal with foods that are going to fill you up, like a glass of water, or maybe a salad with very light on the dressing, or maybe a broth-based soup. So that's going to give you that full feeling so that hopefully you may not overeat what's on your plate for the entree. But again, no food should be forbidden. Anytime you say you shouldn't have that or I can't have that, the first thing you want is that food. I call it the inner brat that comes out. So if you constantly have those messages of, forbidden food, it can be detrimental. So it's important to talk positive to yourself and say, all foods fit. And that's been my mantra throughout the whole semester. All foods fit. You just have to look at the quantity, the frequency, and how it's prepared. And also know that some of these diet foods that have come out and have been manufactured, like low fat and fat free foods, they may not necessarily be low in calories. The other thing is a lot of people eat them thinking that, oh, they're low in calories, and then they overeat. They eat more than they should. So all these things really should be considered. So it's really about the moderation mentality more than anything else. And like I mentioned before, most successful dieters do not skip meals, let alone skip breakfast, because breakfast means break the fast. You're breaking the fast that you've been on all night, so you need food. Your body's requiring it. So when you skip breakfast, all you're doing is you probably make up for the calories at lunch and dinner. Or if you even skip lunch, then you're really making up for the calories. You're so hangry when you get, to where you're going that you 9 times out of 10 are going to eat the wrong thing because it's really quick and easy to grab, like chips and snacks. You also want to really choose your carbohydrates carefully, like we mentioned. Focus on fiber, and fiber is going to help fill you up. And you also want to try to limit foods that have excessive amounts of sugar and, white flour, because they're primarily adding calories. They're not really adding to your satiety level. They're not adding to the nutritional value of your meal. Another point that's extremely important, and we're really emphasizing this more now than ever before, and that is don't cut back on protein foods, because that's how you preserve your muscle. And the recent studies suggest that you have equal amounts of protein at every meal. And what it does is also helps you maintain a very regular blood sugar so you don't ever have that feelings of the cravings. So whenever somebody eats something like maybe a candy bar, and it satisfies them for maybe an hour of that, and then they get hungry again, it's because their blood sugar has dropped, and then they're going to want more food. Whereas if you're including protein at every meal, and hopefully maybe even a little bit at every snack, then you're actually maintaining a better blood sugar level, so you won't have those swings in blood sugar and in hunger. Drinking plenty of fluids is essential. Number one, most people don't get enough as it is. And number two, it's so important for regulating body temperature and helping with digestion. And it also keeps our belly filled. So it gives us satiety. It makes us feel full. So drinking a lot of fluids can really help get your mind off of the food that may just be a mental desire as opposed to a real hunger. So drinking a glass of fluid when you think you're hungry can really kind of maybe take some of the edge off. And then again, you always want to watch out for those things that you're eating that don't have any nutrient value, like alcoholic beverages, mixers, fancy coffee drinks. There's so many, even sport drinks, if you're drinking those without needing to replace your electrolytes, those are places where we get empty calories that can really creep in. And if we're talking about 250 to 500 calories for even a fancy coffee drink, that's just as bad as having a dessert. And you're not really benefiting by any vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So it's really providing a lot of calories that are going to contribute to weight gain. Back in the day, doctors prescribed very low-calorie diets. And those, if they are prescribed, they're usually under the supervision of a doctor who usually puts someone on a commercially prepared formula. And it really helps to promote rapid weight loss. And it's primarily for obese patients. And it's still being used. But again, the key thing is that it's under the supervision of a doctor because, as we mentioned, calories are fuel for the body. The food that you're eating is fuel for the body. So if you're restricting the number of calories to, let's say, 850 a day, you're not really providing your body with what it needs. So you're going to have lethargy, you're going to have lightheadedness, etc. Generally, these people are put on formulas, which could be liquid shakes and maybe bars to keep them satisfied, and they're usually fortified. But this would be for a very temporary situation. That concludes talking about food, although, there's so much to talk about. Exercise is extremely important because when you're losing weight, what you do is you want to burn the number of calories as much as you're reducing your calorie intake. And what that does is it helps to spare your muscle. So it's important to consider activity. Some people think, oh, I'm going to just go on the diet. Now, when I lose the weight, I'll start the exercise. But you're actually changing your body composition when you do exercise. So if you're doing a cardio program, that's helping your heart and it's helping you to burn calories. But when you do a strength training program, you're actually building a little bit of muscle, which helps you to burn calories more efficiently. So if you diet without exercise, you end up, looking a little wasted. But if you're doing cardio and also some strength, you're actually building some muscle, so your body composition is so much better. So think about that. And then on the other hand, you can't just exercise without eating properly. I always say you can't outrun your fork because there's no way that you're going to be able to keep up the exercise to be able to eat whatever you want. You still have to make those changes. But exercise comes with a lot of benefits: improving mood, improving our appetite, helps to reduce blood pressure, reduces our risk for chronic disease. It helps us to deal with stress and anxiety better. And what I like, especially to tell women, is it really helps to improve your self-esteem. A lot of people feel that they're not worthy or whatever feelings. They don't like their body, but it's important to really love your body. And exercise does that. It helps you to increase your self-esteem. It helps you carry yourself more positively. So there's so many more benefits than you can even talk about. Along with increasing stamina and because a lot of exercise is weight bearing, like walking or walking on a treadmill, it can actually help reduce your risk for bone problems. So there's just a lot of benefits. So why would people not want to get into some sort of program where they're moving their body? So how much is needed? The bottom line is, I always say, catch people where they're at. So if you're doing nothing, just start. Just do it. If you're already doing something, maybe try to get to the next level so that you can challenge yourself. And if you haven't done anything and you get out there and start working out, you realize how much your body responds to it and you want to do more because it makes you feel so much better. So if you're doing an optimal program, it's going to include some aerobic training, which is strengthening your heart and helping you burn calories. Strength training, which helps you to build some muscle and helps you lose fat even more efficiently. And then also stretching. So strength and stretching and flexibility are very key because long term, that'll help prevent falls and keeps your core strong, etc. there's so many different kinds of activities. I would say it's best to really focus on something you enjoy because it should be enjoyed and it should be something you look forward to doing. And most health professionals, especially in the fitness industry, would encourage people to make sure that you're getting something you like, but then also doing it consistently. And, not getting into it and going overboard and injuring yourself, but just, get to the point where you feel very comfortable and then maybe you add something else. But interval training is a really key point to consider because you want to do all the finer points of exercise. You don't just want to focus on one thing. So let's say you are a runner. You still want to take time to maybe do some yoga or Pilates where you're actually doing stretching. And then maybe you want to do some, weightlifting or do a yoga class that has weightlifting so that you can build some strength. So there's a lot of things to do, but, more importantly, it's get started, start where you are, see the improvement, and then move on to the next thing.